and we are going to look at our plan. So welcome to Google Classroom and Beyond for Winter School District. So what we're going to really look at this week is practicing using Google Classroom as a student. But at the same time, you're also going to have the opportunity to dive in and really try things as a as a teacher. And so you'll be able to take what you've learned this week and use it in your classroom. So anything that we ask you to do is something that you can also do in your classroom. So for example, if I ask you to make a PowerPoint that you can use in your classroom, you can make that your welcome back to school PowerPoint, or we're not asking you to do busy work by any stretch. There will be assignments, and the only reason there's assignments is because that way you can see what your students see. And you also, that's how I can share information with you. So there may be a lot of assignments, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything has something to do in it. It might just be something that I'm asking you to look at and comment on. And so don't worry about the number of assignments, and it's really more of a opportunity for you guys to see, what will my students see, what does this look like, how do I want to communicate it, and have those thoughts. So so this is the winter Google Classroom, where we're at, and I see you guys are starting to chat. Awesome. And so we have some really nice little comments here. I did put a post in for you guys to share how you're excited about using Google Classroom. And then I've also set it so you guys can post on here. We can fix that if you don't, if as a teacher, and we'll look at that when we get into the Google Classroom nuts and bolts. Today we're going to actually look more at cloud storage. And so we're going to look at Google Drive and the Google suite of things. And then we're also going to look at OneDrive and Office 365 and where your files live and how they live and how you can use them back and forth. And so that's what we're really going to focus on for part of today. And then the other part, we're going to focus on a actual Microsoft Teams meeting. So that's where our focus is today. So when you're in your Google Classroom, you're going to notice at the top we have our tabs. And so as a teacher, I see Stream, I see Classwork, I see People, and I see Grades. As a student, you're only going to see Stream, Classwork, and People. The Stream is where, as a teacher, I can post announcements, and because I have allowed it, you guys as students can also post announcements and say hello, etc., etc. The next tab over is my Classwork tab, and here you're going to see that this is where the classwork is posted. And so I've started out with just one assignment for today, and it is using Google Drive and OneDrive. And so if we go ahead and click on that, and so as a student, you guys can go to your Classwork tab, and you will see this using Google Drive and OneDrive assignment. And I can go to Classwork as a student and show you that also. And I do go back and forth so you can see what it looks like from the student side and the teacher side, knowing that you guys are also seeing it as a student right now. So here is your assignment using Google Drive and OneDrive. So when we click on that assignment, this is where I get all of the information about this class. And so I can go ahead as a student, I will see View Assignment, and I can click on it. Now this is something that as a student, you're going to see, it looks different as on the student side as it does on the teacher side. And so here are some things that I want you to be familiar with the assignments. When we're in assignments, you're going to see that I try to use a numbering system. And so with every class I teach, I start over with 001. And so for winter, I have assignment 001. So that when I'm working with you guys, I can say, okay, I'm on 010 or I'm on 004. And it's just a lot easier to be able to get everybody in the same spot. It's also a lot easier when I'm searching for stuff later. As I scroll on down, you're going to see that this assignment is worth 25 points. And I only threw points on it so that I could show you guys grading tomorrow so you guys can see what that looks like. And I've also given you a due date and a time that it's due today at 2 o'clock. As I keep on scrolling down, now you're going to see some instructions. And I've tried to make the instructions visually appealing and consistent. And so you'll notice as I go through and create assignments and give assignments, I tend to tell you what you need to do. And then I also try to give resources to support your work. And so as you're looking at this, you're going to see consistency. And so these are things that you can say, oh, I like this, or I wouldn't do it this way. This is totally up to you. And so another thing that you'll notice that I try to do often is I say, you know, in the class comments, and if you scroll down to the bottom of the window here, you'll see class comments. That is where everybody in the class can see your comment. And so if you add a class comment to an assignment, like, you know, I don't understand where this is, or how do we, you know, what are we supposed to be writing a paper on? You can ask questions and your whole class can respond back to them. It's also a really great way to have a conversation. And so you can post your conversations there if you want to. And you can say, you know, in the class comments, you know, share your takeaway for this assignment, and they can share that. When you're finished with the assignment, or if you have any questions, you can have a private conversation with the teacher. And this is one of the things that I really like about Google Classroom is as a teacher, I can send comments back to individual students, and as a student, they can send private comments to me. And so we can have a private conversation about this assignment really easily. And then because I'm not asking you to attach anything to this assignment, you'll notice it says mark as done. And so all you have to do is mark as done. If I ask you to create or attach something, then it's going to say turn it in. This blue button says turn it in. So that's kind of the big picture of an assignment. So this is a model assignment, and it's not perfect by any stretch, but this is a model assignment that we're going to do. So this very first thing we're actually learning about is Google Drive and OneDrive. So if we scroll on down, you're going to see I've given you guys a handful of resources here on organization. And there's really a lot more on organization for Google Drive than there is on OneDrive. But there's other resources for OneDrive, and so it's all good. So what I'm going to do next is I am going to go back to me as a teacher, and we are going to look at the differences between Google Drive and OneDrive. So I guess what I want to know right now from you guys. Oh, great. Diane, I love this question. You say on the private comments, do they show up in the same list as the class comments? They do not. And in fact, just because this is, I think, such an integral part, we'll jump right back to that real quick. So let me go back to me as a student. And I will model what happens for you guys. And so I don't understand how to collaborate on this assignment. So I'm going to give a private comment to the teacher, and then I'm also going to add a class comment to this assignment. And so this was me as a student. Now I'm going to ping back over to me as a teacher. And I am in this assignment, and you're going to see that I have a private comment on this assignment. Oops, I'm still not me as a student, sorry. All right, sorry. So now when I go over and I look at this assignment, I can see that I have a public comment here. And then once I go, so there's a class comment, and that's my class comment. Everybody in the class can see it. And then when I view the assignment, that is where I can see, by scrolling on the left, I can see that there is a private comment here. I will also get an email that says I have a private comment. And so there's a couple of different ways that notify me that I've gotten a private comment. And see, I see now that I have a comment here from Carol. And I'm going to look at it. Yes, these will be available to you after the class is over. And that is part of this. And so now I can send a comment back to Carol and say, yes, these are available after class. This is your classroom. And so that's why we're trying to do this in Google Classroom. So yes, and so this is a private conversation between Carol and I. And so it's different than when I'm looking at the class comments, which are only available, or which are available to everybody. And so any class comment can be seen across. And so that's the other thing you'll notice when we are doing our stream. Oh, good, Carolyn. This is a class comment here too. And so you'll notice that it says add class comment. And I'm glad that it clearly states the difference there, because it makes it a lot easier when you're trying to figure out where you're commenting and where you're adding that information. So thanks for asking that. That was a great question. Okay, so let's go back to our assignment. So I'm going to go back to classwork. I'm going to go back and view my assignment and my instructions. And I think I forgot to add something, so hold on. I can edit assignments, which is really nice. And so the skinny snowman, or the 3 dots, when I'm looking at an assignment, I can go in and I can edit. I need to add a file out of my Google Drive that I just totally spaced. Okay. So the nice thing with this is it will add it in, and now I'm going to say that you can only view the file, which is awesome, because I don't want you guys to be able to do anything with this file. And so now when I save it, it'll update it right then and there, and you guys will have access to that file. And so that is actually the file that I want to go to right now. So if you refresh your screen, you have access. So I can add stuff to your file or your assignments really easily. So what we're going to look at is this Collaborate, Google Drive, and Microsoft OneDrive. And so when you click on that, you see just a quick comparison. And then the biggest thing that I'm giving you guys is a cheat sheet for both of them, just because that is going to be probably the most beneficial. Does anybody want to chat and talk a little bit about what they think Google Drive and OneDrive? What is similar about Google Drive and OneDrive? You can unmute or you can just chat.
Okay, Julie?
Yes.
All right, this is Cindy.
Hi.
There is a question across our district as to whether we're going to be using Teams or not. And so can I just clarify?
What?
Teams are going to be used for faculty and faculty communication. And so we will be using the Teams meetings and those kinds of things through administration. But when it comes to students, that's where we're going to be using the Google Classroom. And so I just want everybody to know that it's important to know both sides of that. That's why it wanted to be covered on here. And then as far as the OneDrive is concerned versus the Google Drive, OneDrive allows you to save everything automatically and have it sync, and that's what our school district is going to. These teachers are used to seeing a Z drive, and that Z drive was where you saved everything the last few years. Now it's going to automatically go to OneDrive, and as of next year, you won't have a Z drive anymore. No access to a Z drive.
And it'll be life-changing and you'll be so much happier.
Yeah, it's auto saved, all of those things. OneDrive requires that you have a K-12 email address. And so if you want to save something that's yours privately, get a flash drive, copy it on there so that you have it. Google Drive, though, is where you have to put all of your Google Docs for your Google Classroom. So you're going to have to know both of these.
And the nice thing, thank you for that. And the nice thing with all of this is, Linda, you noted autosave. They both autosave. And Ross, you noted that they are both a place where you can share and store information and access them from multiple platforms and computers. Yes, there is a lot of similarities between Google Drive and OneDrive. And so that's why I decided we would look at both of them kind of hand in hand rather than doing one or the other. They both have our cloud storage. And so by cloud storage, it means that they are stored somewhere off site entirely, in some, not literally a cloud, but in a big server farm somewhere. And the nice thing about that is, as long as you have internet, you have access to your data. It's also backed up and redundant, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's safer than having everything on one server in your building. And then when the power goes out, you don't have access to it. Or if it crashes, you have to wait until it gets rebuilt. In our office, we've moved from servers, so your Z drive, we've moved from that to OneDrive and Teams, and it really has been life-changing, because people who could previously only access files while they were in the office can now access files no matter where they're at. And so especially with like COVID and have everybody moving home, they could access their files wherever they were. So that was pretty awesome. So there is really a lot of transferable knowledge between Google Drive and OneDrive. And so they both live on the cloud. As long as you're on the internet, you can access all your files anywhere. You have the ability to make things available, quote unquote, offline if you need to. And they both have way more storage than you most likely had on the server. And so that's pretty awesome. As Cindy noted, if you're using the OneDrive for education, you do need to have your K-12 account. And we're also using, for our work today, we're using Google Drive and Google Apps for Education, which is also tied in with your K-12 account. And so everything we're looking at is part of your K-12 account for these next few days. As you guys know, you can have a private or a personal Gmail account when that's a Gmail account, and you have a Google Drive with that also. And so you do, so there's that difference. You can also get a free OneDrive account. It has much less storage, etc., but you do have access to a limited OneDrive also. All right. So I gave us cheat sheets for both Google Drive and OneDrive, mainly just because they're a little different, but they have a lot of similarities. So let's pop into the OneDrive first, and we will take a quick look at their quick start guide. And so when we look at OneDrive, some of the things that you see are, it looks a lot like our File Explorer on our computer. And the nice thing is you can actually sync it over to your File Explorer on your computer so that you can still use your File Explorer. So I'm going to go to OneDrive right now. So you guys can all go with me. How I usually get to OneDrive is I go to office.com. So I'll drop that in the chat. And when I am at office.com, I will be asked to log in. And so I'm going to show you what you should see for login. So if we go to office.com, and it'll give you this, welcome. And so I'm going to say I'm going to sign in. And then at that point, it's going to ask me to sign in, and I'm going to sign in with my K-12 account. So when you sign in with your K-12 account, you actually get sent over to the K-12 Data Center's single sign-on, or SSO. And so this will happen when I sign in for Google. It'll also happen when I sign in for Office 365 or OneDrive with my K-12 account. And so if you do not see this when you're signing in with your K-12 account, you may want to talk to your tech coordinator because something isn't quite right. Okay, yes, I'll stay signed in. And boom, I'm now in my office.com site, my Office 365, and I can now click on all of the different apps I have access to. And so you'll see all the familiar ones. We see Word and Excel and PowerPoint, but we also see OneDrive. So in your OneDrive, these are so these are files, and I don't tend to use this OneDrive, so that's why it doesn't look as busy. I use my other OneDrive with my other account a lot more, so big differences there. So when we're looking at our OneDrive here, you're going to see your files. You can see that I can create new files, so I can do a new folder, Word doc, all that stuff. I can upload something, and so if I have files on my computer that I want to upload, I can upload them. I can sync, and this is where if I wanted to sync it to my Finder, I can do that. And then there's a few other things that I can do some automation with. When we start doing teams, something you're going to notice is you will actually have shared libraries from your teams. And so this is something that, so these are my files, but then once I'm doing teams, I'm going to also see some shared libraries. And so you would have a Winter School District shared library, or Winter High School, or Winter Elementary, or depending on how you split up your teams. You will end up seeing a shared library over here too. And that will just be where the files from your team live. So OneDrive is really all of your computer's files now in the cloud. When I look at any file, so I'm going to go to this document file, I can share this file if I want to by clicking on the little share. I can say anyone with the link can view. I can give specific people. I can allow editing. I can set an expiration date. I have a lot of settings that I can control here. I can also, if I click on the three dots, have a lot of other options here. One of the big things is version history. So I can go in and I can see the different versions of this document and any changes that have been made. And so Office 365 and OneDrive essentially give you access to all of your files all the time on the internet, much different than if we were on your computer, because then you can only access them on your computer. So questions about OneDrive real quick. You can unmute or you can drop them in the chat.
Julie, this is Cindy again. We really don't
Hi.
have any questions
Okay.
on that. The only comment would be is for the ones that aren't in this room, when we've been taking the state one, like John and Travis want us to go to the K-12 site and choose Office apps from that for the sign-in. So that's the only difference. Instead of typing Office,
Oh.
actually
So
have you
you,
go, because they'll do all the updates at the K-12 site, so that will always be the most updated versions of the online.
so he has you go here to Office 365.
Correct. That's what he's been showing during that other class training, so.
But it's the same office. It takes me to the same place.
It's the exact same thing. I just don't want people who are taking that other class to be
Okay.
confused. So
Gotcha.
they,
Okay. All right. Oh, that makes sense. So yes. So yeah, if you can always go that route. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I just generally try to keep it as simple as possible. So sorry. I do think I saw a quick question about what happens if you're not on the internet. Okay, so files created offline will save to the hard drive or our computers, and we'll have to upload. Okay, so actually, so if you create something when you're not on the internet and you save it you save it to your OneDrive folder on your computer, excuse me, it will upload automatically when you have internet. That's part of that syncing that it does. And so let's pop over to my computer and so you should see a OneDrive on your computer. So see, I have a OneDrive here where I can access and save files in my File Explorer all I want. And then the nice thing with this is I can see their status. And so if I were to have something that was not synced or was not, I would get a little notification in the lower right hand corner of my computer. And so let me go back to your handouts for today. So when we look at this OneNote tutorial, it does talk a little bit about syncing here. If we scroll on down, so you can sync them, and then you also can view your sync activity. And over on the right here, we have your files on demand. And so you can see exactly where they're at, if they're on your computer or in the cloud. And so that's a great question. So it should automatically go. You shouldn't have to say, I did this at home. It's just a matter of if you've saved it on your OneDrive on your computer or not. And so if you save it on OneDrive, it should always go. Oh, Linda, that's a great question. Which one is better, OneDrive or Google Drive? You know what? They're really about the same anymore. The big difference from my perspective is the collaboration in Google Drive is a lot more powerful. It's just so much easier to collaborate on folders and files than it is in OneDrive or in Office 365. Office 365 is getting there, but it's just not quite there yet. So otherwise, I really do use them fairly interchangeably at this point. It's just a matter of what the need is. So when you're thinking about working with students, you guys will be using Google and Google Drive a lot more. Though with admin, you're going to be using OneDrive and Office 365. So you'll have that balance there. All right, so that is Office 365 or the OneDrive, and that's where you're going to see, you know, all of our files will look like Word and PowerPoint, et cetera, et cetera. So now I'm going to pop back, and we are going to look at the Google Drive cheat sheet, mainly because the Google Drive cheat sheet is one of those things that gives us a nice picture of Google Drive. So Google Drive, OneDrive and Google Drive, you can have on your phone, and so you can put them on your iPad, you can put them on your phone. I have them on all of my devices, and so it's really nice. No matter where I'm at, I can pull up a file or look up something and have access to those documents. I can upload any type of file to my Google Drive, just like I can with my OneDrive. And so if I scroll on down, this is kind of their big explanation of the different file types that they have in Google Drive or in Google Apps. And so you have your Google Docs, so that's going to be the same as Word. You're going to have your Google Sheets. That's going to be comparable to Excel. Google Slides, comparable to PowerPoint. Google Forms. Well, on traditional Office, we don't really have a form program, but there is the Microsoft Forms that you can use, and so you have that. Google Drawings, I would equate that to like Publisher if you've used Publisher, but you can do so many things with Google Drive. It's super fun. And then finally, Google Sites. Google Sites creates websites really quickly, really easily. And so all of these are part of the Google Suite. So what I want to look at now is the structure of your files stored in Google Drive. So this looks a lot like what we just looked at over in OneDrive, in the sense of, you're seeing, a file structure. When we are in Google Drive, you have an ability to prioritize files. You have the files that you are using, and then there's something called shared drives, and we are not going to spend any time on shared drives. They are files that it's like a separate drive where everybody in that drive has access to those files. And that has to be turned on in your domain to make that happen. You can see shared with you, which is something that we'll definitely be looking at. And then finally, you have your trash, and so stuff that you've deleted. One of the nice things that you have here is you can right click on a file or a folder and you can move it, you can manage versions, you can make a copy, or you can download this file. And so this is where a lot of people on the preview were kind of talking about, how do I move files back and forth? We will look at that, how you can move a file from Word over into Google Docs, and then also what happens if we need to take something from Google and move it over to OneDrive. And so we'll be able to go back and forth, and I'll show you how to do that. Sharing is something that is actually really important, and this is a great chart. So it kind of gives you the functionality and a much better explanation of what you can do. And so when we're looking at file folders, you can see the owner and the editor, what they can do compared to just a commenter, and then finally the viewer. And so like this file, I've set up that you guys can only view this collaboration file right here. And so you can't change it, you can't edit it, you can't do anything to it. When I want to add files to my drive, it's only in my drive and not in anyone else's. However, once I share it, it'll be in other people's, other people can see it too. So you can here's how you can access files from anywhere. And then if we keep on scrolling down, that is it. Excellent. Okay. So, but that is with Google, it gives you a nice cheat sheet also. So you have that. They also have a ton of how to switch from, Google Drive, how to go from OneDrive to Google Drive. And so I love this because it tells you how to, if you're in OneDrive, if you want to upload files and folders, here's how you do it in Google Drive. Here's how you share. Here's how you search. Here's how you sort. And so all of the things that you're used to doing in OneDrive, you can do in Google Drive. So it gives you all the instructions. And so for those of you that are trying to figure out how to go back and forth, this is a really great resource. And then finally, I had a lot of questions about how to use Microsoft Files in Google Apps. And so recent updates in Google allow us to edit a Microsoft file allow us to edit a Microsoft Office file directly in Google. And so you have options. You can either edit them, you can convert them, you can comment, and then you can also send them back out again. And so there's different, if depending on what you want to do, we have the different instructions for how to do each one of these. So I wanted to make sure you guys had this because it is one of the things that I get asked a lot. So I do want to take a couple of seconds to look at adding files and moving files around in Google Drive. So I'm going to go to my waffle, which is in the upper right hand corner, and that's where I can see all the apps that I have access to in Google. And so I'm going to click on Drive and it's going to open up. So you're going to notice that I have a number of folders in here. And then I have a bunch of loose files. I really don't encourage you to have loose files. Try to stay organized, says the person who doesn't, but recommends it. Keeping things in folders is highly recommended. But so couple things within our Drive, and this is something that I notice a lot. Default is grid view. And so when we're looking at my Drive, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner, there is a grid. If I click on that, it pulls me over to grid view. And so grid view, especially if you have your resolution on your computer, so that your screen size is fairly large, grid view can get out of control really quickly. It can be really hard to find what you're looking for. It can be really great on one hand because you can see really easily like a preview of the file, but at the same time, if you have a lot of files, it gets really busy. I prefer list view because then I can sort. And so currently I have files sorted by last modified. Mainly that's because that's when I last used these files. So the most recent files are at the top. That's what works for me. But you can also sort by name if you want. And so if you just want everything to be alphabetical, you can do that. But like I said, I prefer last modified just because my most recent files are at the top and that's works for me. This quick access bar are the files that I've most recently accessed. And so that is something else that as we're looking at it, it can be a quick way to find your content. On the left-hand side, you're going to see your priority files. And this isn't something that I've really spent a ton of time on. I have my organization and I'm fine. You also have your shared with me. And so I can go in and I can see what's been shared with me. I can see my recent files. Starred files are files that I have added a star to so that I can find them. Then obviously trash, and then the storage that I have. And so I can go in and look at my files by size. So this is the two different ways, the grid view or the list view, are really useful. So I'm going to make a new folder real quick. And we're going to play some reindeer games. So when you're looking at Google Drive or moving files around, what are some of your frustrations or questions? You guys can unmute.
Okay, Julie, I
Yeah.
got Question here. We
Okay.
have shared with me files because our school does a teacher early warning system and a lunch count, and all of those are done with shared with me files.
Okay.
Can we delete previous years and of those?
Can you do
And
what?
can we delete like 2 years ago's? It only deletes it, our copy from our computer, right? But the person who created it still has the original copy.
They do. And so that deleting an old shared with me file is a little bit challenging. But so let me see if I find something that's been shared with me. How I normally do a shared with me deletion, as long as I have editing rights, is if you take it out. Let's see. If I can do a couple of different things. I can unshare it, and so as the owner, I can make it unshared, and so then I can delete it if I take away everybody else's privileges. The other thing you can do is if you move it, and so right click, move to, and then I have kind of my intermediate because I worry a lot about different things. That's just what I do for sport. So I made a delete folder, and so it's not a it doesn't delete, but it's just a folder. And so once I move it, it'll say, you know, everyone who can see first grade folder will lose access to this item unless the item is shared directly with them. And so if I move it to a folder that is not shared with anybody, then you lose access to it. And then at this point, you can go and delete it if you want to. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that does make sense. But what if you are just the shared person and not the owner? Can you delete your copy of the shared version?
You can. You can delete your copy of the shared version. You can just make it, you can drop it in the delete, but it won't, it'll still be in everybody else's shared files. And so it won't clean up anybody else's files for that, for example. I do tend to try to organize things as folders. And so like the winter school folder, so like I would share this with you guys. I mean, you're in Google Classroom, so I'm not going to, but I could share it with everybody. You guys can add it to your drive, and then everybody, and then, you know, it would just be a folder rather than a file. And it's a little bit easier with folders than it is with files, to kind of manage that, what's in them and what, you know, and then you can archive. The other thing you can do is you can archive them in the sense of you can make a folder that says, you know, 2019-20, and just put all those files in that 2019-20 folder, and they're there. You don't have to delete them because you're not going to run out of space, if that's what you're worried about. It's really more trying to stay organized and not have all these extraneous files roaming around. Does that?
Also, when you're naming folders, like if you want to do classroom folders, you can put a number in front of them so that they sort that way. So you could have a 2 English 9, 3 English 4, whatever. So you'd have your class periods, and then those folders stay in order that way too.
If you're sorting by name.
Correct.
Yes. Yep. If you sort by name, that works out really, really well. Yes. So Diane has a question. You had trouble finding things and wondering if kids could see everything. And so Diane, I have a question back for you then, and you can chat me or you can unmute. Um, what did you have trouble finding? And I mean, were you using Google Classroom? I guess that's my first question. Were you using Google Classroom?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We used Google Classroom last spring, and we kind of just jumped in feet first and didn't look really where we were going. So if I would have a file that I would collect from a student or from a class of students, that who could see them? Could everybody see everybody's file all the time? Did I not set that up right? And then could they delete each other's files by accident or intentionally?
So, and that is something that in Google Classroom, they should not be able to see anybody else's work but their own. And so because you're not necessarily sharing files, you're sharing more so like if I have files here that have been turned into me, only me and the student can see them. Nobody else can see them. The other students can't see them. Where you run into challenges is when you say, oh, here's a student work folder, and you ask the kids to drop that in Google Drive, for example, then it does tend to get a little more complex just because you aren't necessarily using the Google Classroom structure. If we're using the Google Classroom structure, and so let me get out of my assignment here and go to classwork. And so at the top of my classwork, you'll see that I have a class drive folder. So this is me as a teacher. As a teacher, and I don't have any files in this folder yet, just because I haven't done anything. I'm going to go out and we're going to look at another school. And so we'll look at Mobridge. And so here you see that I have a number of assignments and there are files associated with each one of those. And so let me think. I think this one. Yes. And so students shared these files with me. And so these are files that students shared. If I were to go back and look at number 11 as a student, so let me switch over to me as a student real quick. And I'll go to that class. And I'll look at my folder. And so notice all I'm seeing in my Google Classroom Mobridge Pollock folder are my assignments. I'm not seeing, so I have the 2 assignments that I put in for assignment 11, or two different documents that I put in. They are both here, but I don't see any of the other files that as a teacher I see. Does that make sense?
Okay, Julie, it's still kind of fuzzy for several of us.
Okay, that's okay, and that's what I'm here for. And this is, so let's
But this is also something you're going to cover when we get to Google Classroom,
this
correct?
will be something that we'll go into further in Google Classroom, yes. And so when you are using Google Classroom, I guess as long as you're using Google Classroom as it, and not, not saying, and having the students turn their files in through Google Classroom and not saying, oh, share that with me or email it with me, email it to me, then only you and the student will see those files. There is an activity that I sometimes have you guys do where you make something and then you share it so that anybody can comment, and then you share the link in the class comments, and that's just an opportunity to allow people to be able to share, so that we can share documents back and forth a little bit more. But unless unless as a teacher you have said everybody can edit a document, then the students only see their documents and you only see the students' documents. There is no back and forth. And I think I have a graphic for that. I'll see if I can find that and bring in tomorrow when we do some Google Classroom stuff, okay?
Thank you.
Yes. And I'm glad you asked that question though, because I think that's such a, making sure we kind of understand where things are and who can see them is huge. So cool. Okay. So I've done a ton of talking. And it's not as much fun as if you guys are doing stuff. Oh, nice. So Brett shared that they used a shared file for Student Staff Friday, and every teacher had access to edit it and enter names and what assignments. Yes, I love that. That is such a great example of a collaborative document that teachers have access to be able to work together. So that's perfect. Okay. So we've kind of been dangerous a little bit. We've dabbled into Google Drive. And since a lot of you have used Google Drive for like the Student Staff Fridays and different things, we're going to do a scavenger hunt. And so there's two different files that are part of the scavenger hunt, and they're both Google Slides. And so the first one is the Google Drive scavenger hunt, and that's our collaborative file. And so I'm going to drop each of you into a breakout room. And these are our questions. And so everybody has the same file. There is a slide for every room. And so when you're in room 1, you will be using room 1. And so you'll drop in your group members. And it looks like you guys are way on it. Somebody's already been answering questions. So whoever gets room 1, you're lucky. um, the scavenger hunt instructions are Google Drive scavenger hunt instructions. And these are something that you can use with your students too, if you want to. And so what you do is you go ahead and go complete the slides for each color. And then once you've completed the slides for that color, you go answer the questions on your collaborative slide in that color. And so we're going to go through and we're going to look at creating a folders. We're going to look at creating files, organizing files, sharing files, types of sharing, and then organizing shared files. And so this is a way to kind of dive in and really explore the different things that we can do in Google Drive, because A, we want our students to be able to do this, and B, if you have a good understanding of how these shared collaborative cloud files work, it doesn't matter if you're using OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox or any of those types of cloud storage platforms. They're all going to have a lot of similarities, and you'll be able to take that knowledge everywhere you go. So let us look at the chat one more time. No, a student does not have to be 13 years old to use Google Classroom. If they are using, when we're using the Google Apps for Education, it is set up so that it is school approved or safe or whatever. And so you can use Google Classroom K-12 and beyond. If you're using your personal Google account, then it would be more like if you were using Facebook or any of the other resources. So great question about if Google Classroom, if a student has to be 13 or older in order to use it. No, as long as you're using the Google Apps for Education, because it has the protections. We can go in and do version history. Tomorrow when we're in Google Classroom, we'll be able to look at how we can set up the Guardian notifications. We'll also look at how you can, as a teacher, you can delete comments, but you can still see those deleted comments. And so you'll be able to say, you know what, that wasn't an appropriate comment. I've deleted it. I've muted you, but we're going to have a conversation about that. And so it gives you a lot more control. Okay, so what I need to have happen right now is I need everybody to be in the Google Drive scavenger hunt slides and the Google Drive scavenger hunt instruction slides. So 2 different files. And then I've got you broken out into breakout rooms of about 2 to 3 people per room. So I'm going to encourage you. Oh, somebody's. I can go back and look at version history, you guys. It's okay. You're good. So we'll have 2 to 3 people per room. I encourage you to divide and conquer, to work together. Totally just see what you can do to solve this quick scavenger hunt. If we don't get through all of it, it's not the end of the world. This is just more of an opportunity to practice with collaborative slides and to dive into some guided practice with Google Drive. So, any questions about breakout rooms or Google Drive before I send you out to breakout rooms? So you will have about 15 minutes to do this. So go ahead. Once you're in the breakout room, find your breakout room number and it'll tell you at the top. And then go to the slide number. And so, for example, if you're in room 1, you're going to be on slide 1. If you're in room 10, you're going to be on slide 10. If you have any questions, you can always ask for help and I'll pop into the breakout rooms. You can also chat and I will see that. So are we ready? Okay, so I'm gonna, you're ready? All right, I'm gonna open the breakout rooms. Tell me some real quick takeaways from your breakout room experience and going through the Google Drive. I see some really good reflections in the docs. So quick takeaways, and I know not everybody got done, and that is okay. And you can chat or you can unmute. Yes, Kelly. You learn a lot more by playing around rather than listening to somebody talk. So I mean, you didn't say that, but I said that. But yes, it does make it so much easier if you can go in and do stuff. Totally. Other questions or ideas or big takeaways from this? I really noticed you're switching screens back and forth. Yes, the switching is a challenge. So yeah, Lisa, I totally get that. One of the things in the purple, I noticed, and I don't remember which slide, which group had it, but that sharing files, there is like, what are some rules you should keep in mind before you share a file with someone? Do you need to finish your homework? Um, Pat. So you are more than welcome to go back and just make sure you can do these things. So I encourage you to, review those and make sure that you have at least thought of, like the sharing files is one that I think is really important. And some of the people, but one of the slides, and I don't remember which one, talked about FERPA in the sharing. So what rules should you keep in mind? And what rules should you keep in mind if someone shares a file with you? Um, yeah, I know. Time is, we always need, yes, time. Um, but yeah, so like those sharing files and making sure we're in, we're thinking of that. Does somebody want to unmute and chat? All right. So just so if you did not get through with this, feel free to go back and revisit and just make sure that you've thought about all of the different things. Mainly because being able to navigate and organize your Google Drive is so, or your OneDrive, 6 of one, half dozen the other, is so important. So let's flip back over. So Pat asked a question about, do you need to finish your homework? So as we're looking at your homework, really, we were going to complete the Google Drive scavenger hunt. I'm giving you guys permission that if you're not done with it, don't worry about it unless you want to go back. Make sure you add any class comments if you have any ahas or thoughts or questions you may have. And then you can also add a private comment, but definitely mark it as done, because then we'll be able to look at grading tomorrow when we come back around and look at Google Classroom. And so it'll be nice to be able to look at grading. I did, while you guys were hanging out in yours, I posted another assignment. And so we have 15 more minutes, and I want to take a quick look at Teams meetings before we wrap up for today. Since Teams meetings is where you guys are going to be spending most of your time on the admin side and working with with teachers in the district. I love Teams because it is a quick way to chat back and forth, um, chat back and forth, and then also you can have the video calls, share files, a lot of really great resources. And so, but Carolyn has a really good question or comment here, and she says, "I hope our computer teachers are going to help the kids get better ready for completing homework, and we, as our teachers, will need to train our kids in how we want the students to complete the work and submit it." And so this is one of those things that I'll try to model throughout the week. When you look at the assignments, like making sure tomorrow you'll see something that says, you will create a document or you will attach a file. And so those are those kinds of things that as we kick off our year with Google Classroom, if we can spend a little bit of time with our students and say, here is here's what you need to do with this assignment, provide those good instructions and have those expectations. And the other thing, you guys, you can ship it back to them and say, yeah, you didn't do this work. Just because I click turn it in doesn't mean that I'm done. So yes. So Teams meetings, real quick. As we're looking at Teams meetings, I'm going to pop in and we will do a Teams meeting in a Google meeting because why not? Or in a Zoom meeting because why not? We can do it all, right? So here's the top search result. I am using Teams app on my computer. You can also use Teams in the browser. One of the really nice things with Teams is it does connect with your calendar. And so while I'm in Teams, I can also see exactly what's going on in my calendar. So I'm going to do a real fast meeting right now in Teams. So the nice thing here is when I make a meeting, I can invite attendees. I can do this from my calendar. I can do this from Teams. And so now I'm going to save it. And once I go to the meeting now, I can, whoops, I lied. So let me add me as a, okay. So now when I'm in my demo meeting and I've invited somebody to it, I can actually start this meeting and roll with it. So here's my join Teams meeting option, and once I do that, oh my goodness, continue editing. Oh, I don't know that I'm going to be able to do this in my, oh, here we go, join. Okay, so I'm going to join the meeting. So we're just doing a real quick kind of what you see while you're in a Teams meeting. And so I'm going to say join. And it's going to tell me that the video isn't working because I'm using the video for my Zoom right now. And so if I stop video for Zoom, I can use my video on Teams. But there's just a handful of things that I want you to kind of think about as you're looking at Teams meetings. This bar, while annoying, is going to be your control bar at the bottom of your screen. You have the ability to do some really awesome features. And so you can have background effects if you want. And so you can blur your background, you can upload backgrounds if the district has it turned on. All of that kind of stuff. You also have a live captions, which are really great if you can't listen to a meeting. You can live caption it. I'm muted right now, so it's not going to work, but you get the idea. Couple other things, you can raise your hand in a meeting. And so when we look at our participants, you do have the raise hand option. And that is really different than like in Zoom, we have a lot of different feedback tools. In Teams, the only thing we have right now is the raise hand. You also have the ability to have a chat. And so if we're looking, we can chat. And one of the nice things with the chat is I can attach files. I can attach emojis and GIFs and all that stuff, and so I have that functionality. And then the last thing in the participants, and this may be nice if you do end up deciding to use this with your students, is you can download an attendance list, and that will give you a Excel doc that just tells you who joined and when they joined and how long they were there. And so you can do an attendance list. So Teams meetings are an awful lot like Zoom meetings, just with a few less features. This button here is our hang up button. And so once I hang up, we go back to our normal normal session. One of the things I did give you guys is an interactive Teams document that, or demo, that actually I really do encourage you to go through, especially if you're going to be using Teams as a collaborative resource for your staff, because it goes through all of the different tools that are in Teams, and you actually get to interact with it, so it's kind of fun. I use chat extensively because I can send a quick chat to a colleague. They can get back to me when it's convenient. It's not as intrusive as a phone call, and it's a little less formal than an email. And so I use chat a lot. And then within Teams, that is where you can have groups of people. And so you could have your working groups, you could have your elementary school, you could have your middle school, your high school, but you could also have your building leadership team could have a team. And so lots of different options within the Teams functionality there. And then the last thing I gave you guys was this. It says processing request, which no idea. But the processing request, which is really 25 things that are happening, that are updates for Microsoft Teams for Education for back to school. And the only reason I'm sharing that is because Teams has been, saying they're going to do all these different things. And so like breakout rooms are coming in Teams. So you'll be able to do like what we did today in Zoom, in Teams. But it runs through and kind of gives you all of the different options. And so if you do end up wanting to try it out with your students, you will have some different options that are coming up. So like they have the whiteboard, which you also have in Zoom. They're adding some student safety, et cetera, et cetera. So different things there that if you are going to do Teams meetings, it'll be good to have that functionality. So within Teams meetings, the only thing that you have to do when we look at this assignment, oh, somebody's already turned it in. Look at you guys. Is review it. Add any class comments about questions or ahas. And then if you have private comments for the teacher, you can add that. So that pretty much covers that. So we still have a few minutes left, and so questions, comments, thoughts as we jump into tomorrow, because tomorrow we're going to actually go into Google Classroom. We are going to address the topics, the setting up, kind of the big logistics that the Google Classroom course doesn't go through, and we'll do that. So for those of you that haven't set up Google Classroom yet or haven't done the online course, we will be going through the steps, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide so that when you do create your Google Classroom, you can watch tomorrow, you can absorb, and you'll have resources to follow along when you create your classroom. What we're really going to look at tomorrow is kind of the nitty-gritty things, like what are you thinking about for your organization system? How are you thinking for like the special ed? How are you thinking about setting stuff up? For some of the specials, what makes the most sense for you? We're also going to look at topics and organization there. We'll also look at the settings for both notifications and the classroom settings, so that what shows up on your stream, how your grade book is set up, all those things, to answer some of the questions that people have asked. And this feels like it feels like more advanced, like Google Slides, but we are going to look at how to deal with PDFs, because so many of us have PDFs, and we're going to look at some of the ways that we can deal with PDFs before we end up, so that we can use them effectively. Nicole, thank you for asking that question about credit. So as soon as I get the graduate credit information, I will drop it in your classroom. I'll also drop it on the website, and I'll also make sure there's an email that goes out. The other thing is I will have it set up so that you guys need to finish by the 13th. So it gives you a whole nother week to do any of the assignments, et cetera, et cetera. And do know that most of the assignments are going to be mark is done. You will have to create some things, but definitely not. I mean, we are adults, and really this is just more of a way for you to see what classroom assignments look like. So the credit assignment will come out as soon as I get it. So hopefully I'll get it shortly. Any other questions before we wrap up for today? So if you do have to miss a day, I am recording these sessions. So I don't record the breakout rooms because they don't record, but everything else gets recorded. And then I'll post those in our materials for the class. And so they will be posted. And then you can come back and watch them and follow up and do any of the assignments, etc. If you have any questions or anything, definitely let me know, and you can either send a note send a private comment to me in an assignment, or you can send me an email. All right, are there any questions or comments before we wrap up for today?
Thank you, Julie. We appreciate you.
Yes, well, thank you guys. It's been fun to have you, and so I'm excited for tomorrow because hopefully there'll be more questions and we'll get into more more of the nitty gritty. But today is really important because that whole how to manage your drive and how to organize it is really important. So, thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.